In my last video, I was talking about anxiety, like how do we conquer it? Today, I want to talk about using cognitive restructuring to manage the anxiety. Hi, I'm Dr. Shamaya Vaughn, and my channel is for women recovering from childhood trauma who want to stop surviving and start thriving. Listen to this channel, listen to this video today if you want to hear my thoughts on how women, transgender women, non-conforming people can choose a new path today and start creating a life they love. Although I am a professor and a licensed therapist, the work I am doing here on this YouTube channel is about personal coaching sessions. We're not going to do therapy here. I might do a little professoring, a little teaching, but we're not going to do any therapy here. Because some of you do not need talk therapy anymore. You need a few coaching sessions to implement your action plan. So first, I'll talk about the thinking errors we make that cause us stress and anxiety. Second, I will describe how we question our thoughts to manage our anxiety. This can help prevent panic attacks. If you've ever had a panic attack, you know what I'm talking about. You think you're going to die. So much so that when people are having a panic attack, they often go to urgent care or the ER, only to be told that it's psychological. It's not a heart attack. So I used a big phrase at the beginning. I called it cognitive restructuring. I think most people call it like mindset shift or something like that. But cognitive restructuring is exactly what it sounds like. You will share the thoughts that anxiety tells you to believe and thoughts anxiety tells you are true, and we will adjust those statements to reflect reality, right? You want to confront anxiety head on. That's not true. Wait a minute, right? Because you know there's exceptions. If there's even one exception, the thought cannot be true. So I want to describe some categories your anxiety may be placing your thoughts into. So one type of cognitive distortion, that's what we'll call them, is when we engage in black and white thinking, right? And when we engage in that dichotomous thinking, there's no space for nuance or shades of gray. We hear the phrase that there are two sides to every story. No. Often there are 3 or 4 or more viewpoints to consider. And our anxious thoughts are extreme. Example, I did not get called for an interview because I am not qualified. Or there are thousands of reasons others are chosen over us, and some reasons can be that another person has more experience, but it is not the only reason. So let's go ahead and reflect. Do you have some black and white thoughts right now? They're barriers. Trust me, they are barriers to success. The second error we make is when we overgeneralize, right? We draw a conclusion about everything based on one experience or one person's feedback. When we overgeneralize, we also tend to make the experience true or the precursor for everything to happen. So an example is, I got a speeding ticket, so I am a terrible driver. Cognitive restructuring says, I woke up late, I rushed to get to a meeting and ignored the speed limit when I usually obey it. I am not a terrible driver. I had a crappy morning, and this is the end result. Time for some reflection. What do you tend to overgeneralize in your life right now? It's almost like being your own bully. A third thought pattern that anxiety creates is worst case scenarios. This is an awful thing. Some people call it their superpower, right? I can think of 88 things wrong with every idea someone comes up with, or things that can go wrong. Yeah, worst case scenarios sometimes happen. So this looks like predicting the worst outcome without any evidence that the things we fear will happen. I will self-disclose here as an example. When I was younger, before starting my own therapy, I used to think every mistake I made in personal or professional lives would eventually lead to homelessness. Like that was my fear. I do not want to be homeless. Oh God, I do not want to be a homeless person. If I make a mistake, if I mess up, if I'm not perfect, I'm going to be homeless. That was the worst case scenario for me for everything. Death was not the worst case scenario. It was homelessness. So an example, if I choose the wrong major, I will not get a good job, or I will get a low salary, and then I cannot afford rent, and then I will get evicted and become homeless, right? And this was just going through my mind on a loop all the time, right? Freezing me into making decisions out of fear. It sounds ridiculous, right? How can picking a college major lead to homelessness? That's when we confront anxiety. So, time for some reflection. What have you imagined the worst case scenario about recently? What's your internal loop? A fourth mind trick anxiety plays on us is making everything about us and taking responsibility for things outside of our control. This commonly happens in relationships, like romantic relationships, friendships, right, family relationships. If someone ghosts us or says they no longer want to communicate with us, right, they're going to go no contact with us, we immediately wonder what we could have done differently, how we can be a better person, right? We think about those things. What do I need? What's wrong with me? What do I need to do? Unless we are a complete jerk, and you know who you are. You assholes know that they're assholes, okay? So unless you are a complete jerk, you did not meet the needs of another person, which has nothing to do with us. At different times in our lives, when people are seeking friendship, they have an idea in their head about what kind of friendship they want. They rarely share it with the other person because they feel needy or something. If they're in a romantic relationship, they have some unmet needs by that person, and they're not ready to share them with them. They would rather just end it and go tell someone else for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason. We're not going to play detective there. If you don't meet the needs of another person, that has nothing to do with you. They have to find their person somewhere else. So right now, we're going to go into reflection mode. And I want you to think about, what are you personalizing or taking responsibility for that is not within your locus of control? If someone breaks up with you, let them go. They are doing what's right for them, and we want to honor that. If someone wants to end a friendship with us, let them go. They're doing what's best for them. A fifth thinking error we have, right, 5, we make a mistake of making assumptions. You know, when we lack information, we'll just fill in the gaps with whatever we thought of. That's not a good way of doing things, right? When we make the mistake of making assumptions, when we lack information, we are not being fair to the situation or ourselves. So we assume what other people are thinking. We assume why people said something or why they did something. This is usually because we are afraid to ask a question directly. We are afraid to confront someone, or we avoid conflict. So the issue is not only these assumptions, but we create stress in our lives when we make decisions based on assumptions and not reality. Oh, I didn't get the job? I wonder why. Let me ask. They're breaking up with me. Oh, why do you want to end our relationship? Oh, why do you want to end our friendship? This is not a dialogue. You're going to ask the question to get clarity, and then you move on. You cannot hold them hostage debating their thoughts and values and beliefs. So, reflection time. What assumptions do you make? The sixth error we make in anxiety is focusing on negative things and ignoring all the positive things. For example, as a professor, teaching, my sort of smaller career was a full-time job at one point, but now I just do it part-time. Each semester, there are hundreds of student evaluation comments from all of the courses I've taught. So most professors are teaching 4 classes, right? So that's, about 20, 25 students in each class, and all of them are completing these student evaluations. I would receive lots of positive comments from students, but anxiety would have me focus on the 1 or 2 negative comments. That's what anxiety does. This happens with social media. People make positive comments or negative comments, to your post or whatever it is, to show support for a person online. But the person is devastated based on what one person said, right? You may have glowing, heart, thumbs up, way to go, I'm so glad you mentioned this, I feel so seen and heard. You can hear all of that from your social media posts, but if one person says something negative, that's the comment that sticks out. We also tend to believe negative comments about us and ignore any positive feedback we receive. This is a thinking error. This is a thought error, and anxiety lives here. So I want you to reflect. How does this show up for you, this error on focusing only on the negative and not the positive? The 7th problem with our thinking occurs when anxiety allows us, to go around all day telling us what we should do, what we should wear, what we should say, based on either familial expectations or societal norms. Why? Who says, right? This thought process makes us so miserable because we do not pause long enough to consider what we want, what we need. So reflection time. What is an example of something you think you should be doing? And you probably beat yourself up for procrastinating on it. The last type of thinking we do that is a problem is believing that our emotions or our feelings are facts. This is where our brain can lie to us. Example, I feel ugly, so I must be ugly. I feel like a loser, so I must be a loser. None of the emotions or feelings are ever positive. Anxiety is not into positivity or optimism or hope, right? Anxiety is all about the negative. So what is one negative emotion or feeling you have right now that you have always assumed was a fact and you've never investigated it? Okay, so now that we have named what requires cognitive restructuring, let's focus on how to interrupt these anxious thoughts. These are the questions you will ask each of the cognitive distortions I just explained. Those different thought errors, yeah, they're here, right? Okay, I'm having this thought. Is this thought based on your emotion or actual facts? We have to start there, right? We want to make sure things are defined accurately. The next question, what evidence is there that this thought is accurate? And then the opposite, what evidence is there that this thought isn't accurate? Think about the thought. What's the worst that could happen? Right? I'm inviting you to explore the worst case scenario. And then let's assume the worst case scenario happens. How could I respond if the worst happens? Again, anxiety can decrease once we have a plan. The last one, is this really a black and white situation or are there shades of gray here? I want you to consider that you might need to do a little bit more work investigating your thoughts.